Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Mishabam Zabadaraja Kachar Stote Sata Sisi Madesi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnubam Zabadaraja Kachar Stote Sata Sisi Mad Bhakti Siddhanta Sarjidako Prabhupada Ki Go Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 14, Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening, Text 41. Tada Vishveshvara Krudo Bhagava Loka Bhavanaha Hanishyat Yavatir Yaso Yatadrin Shataparvadrik Tada Vishveshvara Kluddo Bhagava Loka Bhavanaha Hanishyat Yavatir Yaso Yatadrin Shataparvadrik Tada Vishveshvara Kruto Bhagava Loka Bhavanaha Hanishyat Yavatir Yaso Yatadrin Shataparvadrik Vaishnavis. Tada, at that time, Vishva Ishvara, the Lord of the universe, Kruda, in great anger, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lokabhavana, desiring the welfare of the people in general. Hanishyati, will kill. Avatirya, descending himself. Aso, he. Yata, as if. Adreen, the mountains. Shataparvadrik, the controller of the thunderbolt. Indra. Translation. At that time, the Lord of the universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the well-wisher of all living entities, will descend and kill them, just as Indra smashes the mountains with his thunderbolts. Purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 4:8, the Lord descends as an incarnation to deliver the devotees and kill the miscreants. The Lord of the universe and of everything would appear to kill the sons of Diti because of their offending the devotees of the Lord. There are many agents of the Lord, such as Indra, Chandra, Varuna, Goddess Durga, and Kali, who can chastise any formidable miscreants in the world. The example of mountains being smashed by a thunderbolt is very appropriate. The mountain is considered the most strongly built body within the universe, yet it can be easily smashed by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead does not need to descend in order to kill any strongly built body. He comes down just for the sake of his devotees. Everyone is subject to the miseries offered by material nature, but because the activities of miscreants, such as killing innocent people and animals or torturing women, are harmful to everyone and are therefore a source of pain for the devotees, the Lord comes down. He descends only to give relief to his ardent devotees. The killing of the miscreants by the Lord is also the mercy of the Lord towards the miscreant, although apparently the Lord takes the side of the devotee. Since the Lord is absolute, there is no difference between his activities of killing the miscreants and favoring the devotees. Translation again. At that time, the Lord of the universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the well-wisher of all living entities, will descend and kill them, just as Indra smashes the mountains with his thunderbolts. Om Agana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. At that time, the Lord of the universe will descend and kill them. At what time? At the time of the two corrupt sons of Diti causing such havoc and destruction. That's the time when the Supreme Personality of Godhead will descend. So you're in the midst of a disaster. You might think, well, what is the big deal about the pregnancy of Diti in the evening? Pregnancies happen all the time. This one didn't happen according to plan, but that also, stuff like that happens. So what's the fuss? What's all the problem here? We learn in this chapter the principles of establishing a real human civilization. The consciousness of the parents at the time of conception plays such a crucial role in the quality of the population. Our Bhagavatam Siddhanta informs us that the quantity of the population in the world is not the real problem. The problem is the quality. If the quality of the population is proper, the earth can sustain all creatures with no problem. But because of the lack of quality, human beings are a burden to the earth. Let's recall how this chapter started, because you might wonder, how did things take such a turn? From the very beginning, when Vidura is telling Maitreya Rishi, I'm not satisfied. I haven't been fully satisfied hearing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I want to hear more. Not only do I want to hear more, but I know that what I'll hear from you is anushushama. It is coming down in the chain of parampara. That knowledge makes me even more eager to hear. And Maitreya compliments Vidura. You are showing all the characteristics of a real devotee. You're so eager to hear. So I'm going to tell you. Now what happened? You see, in the preceding chapter, Vidura has been hearing about the first appearance of Lord Varaha. That first appearance, as you may have heard, does not kill Hiranyaksha. You see, what the Bhagavatam does is merge the accounts of two appearances of Lord Bor. Those two appearances happen in different manvantaras, different millenniums. So the first one is whitish, Sweta Varaha. The second one is reddish. The second one is the one that battles Hiranyaksha and kills him. So Vidura wants to hear more about the killing of Hiranyaksha. That means the second Bor incarnation. The Bhagavatam merges the two, the Acharyas point out. So you might say, well, how is it that the Bhagavatam does this? Just like in Krishna Lila in the 10th canto, some pastimes are relayed by Shukadeva Goswami out of order. So according to the Western sensibility, this is a flaw. How can you ignore chronology? But you see, Bhagavatam is a rasa shastra in which the ecstasy is more important than chronology. Shukadeva Goswami, sometimes in narrating the pastimes of Krishna Lila, he presents things out of order because he's overwhelmed with ecstasy. Whereas in a mechanistic material culture, you want to stress chronology, step 1, step 2, step 3. In school, when you're young, they make you memorize dates, 1776. The American colonists didn't want to pay their taxes, so they revolted against England. You're supposed to learn all the dates. 1865 or whatever, the Civil War. But dates are not of utmost importance in Bhagavatam. They're there, but the emphasis is not on them, because Bhagavatam is about the ecstasy of pure love of Krishna. That counts most in a real civilization. So we don't fault Shukadeva Goswami for narrating pastimes out of sequence. We don't fault the speakers of Bhagavatam like Maitreya Rishi for putting together as one Leela the two appearances of Lord Bor. So Vidura wants to hear more about Lord Bor. I've heard about the first one, and now I want to hear about the second one. And it's the second one who is the result of Diti's unplanned pregnancy in the evening. So Maitreya tells Vidura, I'm going to speak to you what I heard a long time ago from Brahma. Brahma explained all this, and I'm going to say the same thing to you. So this is the luxury, this is the benediction of the parampara. Evam parampara praptam imam rajasayo viduhu. As Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, this knowledge comes down through disciplic succession, and the saintly kings, the Rajarshis, understood it in that way. And I'm going to now repeat it again. So this is not just some theological doctrine. This is actually a scientific system for passing down authorized knowledge. I remember in Dallas, Texas, one devotee was very fascinated by Vedic technology, about the Vimanas, the Vedic aircraft, and Vedic mystic powers. And so he asked Prabhupada, can you explain about Vedic technology? He was thinking Prabhupada was going to give a whole presentation about mystical aircraft like Shalvas, and Prabhupada just looked at him and said, Vedic technology means parampara. You have to think about that. Parampara, I mean, okay, this one tells that one tells that one, what's the big deal? But that is how genuine knowledge is transmitted. I was explaining yesterday at a gathering of students that without authorized knowledge, you can't make any advancement. If your knowledge is coming from dodgy sources, how do you expect to have anything more than a dodgy life? So we stress parampara not because it's just some doctrine. We stress it because it is applied spiritual technology. Hearing about Krishna through parampara grants you realization. In other words, the parampara is the lens by which you can actually see. So it's not just some philosophical concept. Just like my eyeglasses for reading, they're not just some theological concept. I see through them better. So similarly, parampara means you can actually see by hearing. And Vidura knows this. Therefore he says, Anushushuma, tell me as it has been heard before. So now we enter into the problem between Diti and Kashyapa. And you can really be down on Diti, but you have to understand the pressure she was under. She was one of 13 daughters of Daksha who were married to Kashyapa Muni. And all the 13 daughters except Diti had children. She had none. So she was feeling some psychophysical pressure, which exploded at the wrong time, at the wrong place. Kashyapa, what was he doing? He was in the sacrificial arena. He has been doing oblations, swaha, into the sacrificial fire for pleasing Vishnu. Not only that, at the point when Diti approached him, he was in samadhi. So you have wrong time, it was twilight, and you have the wrong place, sacrificial arena, and you have Kashyapa in samadhi. But evidently, Diti was feeling such psychophysical pressure that she could not wait. Kashyapa tried to, prolong the whole affair by talking and talking, well, this, well, that, well, that. He was hoping, let's get past twilight. It didn't work. Now you might say, well, what about Kashyapa? I mean, doesn't he get some of the blame? The ladies may say, why is all the blame on Diti? What about this guy? You know, it takes two to tango. Try to understand mercifully about Kashyapa. He caved in due to a sense of obligation that evidently his wife had pleased him at other times, and there's a sense of family obligation. It's a little difficult for Westerners to understand because Western life means you just do your own thing no matter what. You don't feel obligated to anyone. You don't feel any lasting commitments except to your own sense gratification. But Kashyapa was immersed in a web, a network of obligations. His wife's sisters all had children. What about her? And so he was caught between a rock and a hard place. But at least he tried to get her to wait until they got past the inauspicious time of twilight. He even told her, look, you may not see it, but I see it. All these hobgoblins and demons are present. This is the time when they're very strong. You don't want to have reproductive activity at this time. The results will be tragic. I see it all. I see these creatures. But she gave her own interpretation of Shastra. She said, when someone is in distress, there should be immediate counteraction. We can just see ourselves saying something like that. Yes, the Shastra says, but however, be practical. In this situation, there must be an immediate counteraction of distress. So you would say, well, Kashyapa, hold the line. But you have to understand, as I said, all the network of obligations that Kashyapa was immersed in. So things happened. Wrong time. Husbands in samadhi at the sacrificial arena. And so now Diti is lamenting. How did she go from such a strong desire to lamentation afterwards? This is the nature of Maya. At first, things look like this must be done. There's no other solution. This has to happen. And then afterwards, what was I thinking? Oh my God. Why did I let that happen? So now she's lamenting, and Kashyapa, the acharyas say, is expressing anger. Okay, you've done like this. You pushed it. Now I'm going to tell you the results. Number one, you were in bad consciousness. Number two, the time was totally wrong. It was against Dharma. Number three, you didn't listen to me. And number four, you disrespected the devatas, the demigods, especially Lord Shiva. Therefore, you can't expect any auspicious result. And he's now explaining to her, because of your polluted consciousness and because of the polluted time, 2 horrible sons will be born from you. They'll cause havoc throughout the world. But the end of their destruction will happen when the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself kills your 2 sons. Diti was happy to hear that. That brought some sunshine amidst her lamentation, the clouds of her lamentation. Now you might say, well, what mother would be happy to hear that her sons are going to be killed? But Diti was worried that my sons could be killed by the wrath of brahmanas. I'd rather them be killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, because I know then my sons will get liberation. So that's what's going on in this verse today. The killing of the miscreant by the Lord is also the mercy of the Lord towards the miscreant. although apparently the Lord takes the side of the devotee. Since the Lord is absolute, there is no difference between his activities of killing the miscreants and favoring the devotees. So Diti was happy. The end of the destruction caused by my sons will happen when they're killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I know that that will be for their benefit. So she's lamenting, she's hoping that Lord Shiva will be merciful upon her, because Lord Shiva is the husband of Diti's sister. So she's trying all angles here. Please, Lord Shiva, you are my brother-in-law. Don't kill my boys, please. But when she hears that they'll be killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as we said, she's happy about that. Furthermore, Kashyapa says that not only will the Supreme Personality of Godhead kill your sons, but there will be a grandson who is a great devotee. So in the third canto, you get quite a few verses leading up to the appearance of Prahlad Maharaj in the seventh canto. So it's not total disaster, but it is a very inauspicious moment that down the road has great good. But Kashyapa is stressing, right now we've got a problem. This emphasis on bringing children into the world in proper consciousness is something that is so overlooked and so forgotten in the world today. Parents have no idea that everything is connected to everything else, and their consciousness will bring about certain reactions. Diti should have known better. That's why Kashyapa is angry. You know what Dharma is. He tried to convince her otherwise, and he also complimented her about the great fortune of having a wife and what the wife does to protect the husband. He complimented her. Of course, Prabhupada and also the previous acharyas say, well, Kashyapa had to be a little bit joking. He said, wait a minute, why joke about what the wife brings to the table in a relationship? Evidently, Kashyapa was getting a bit enthralled. He was getting a bit affected. And so he was losing a little bit of his ability to resist. As Srila Prabhupada explains, that if Kashyapa would have gotten angry and chosen to show a hard line, that could have stopped the whole thing. But he didn't choose that. And therefore, he began to, as I say, he began to wax. He began to speak in such a positive way. Oh, my wife, you are this. Oh, you are that. Remember, he's coming out of samadhi. She couldn't attract him physically because he was in samadhi, his eyes were closed. She couldn't attract him by eye movements. Again, he's in samadhi. She couldn't even attract him by speaking softly. She had to speak loudly because she wanted to wake him up out of samadhi. So all this is going on. And so again, you may wonder, why Kashyapa, why didn't he take the hard line? No. He felt obligated. Again, we're back to that point of Kashyapa being immersed in a Vedic system of obligation, and his wife really wanted a child, and she wanted the child to happen right then and there, and he couldn't handle that. although he knew this is not going to result, this is not going to end in a good result. So afterwards, he's speaking to her angrily, explaining the repercussions, which he knew all along because he'd already warned her. This is the time when Lord Shiva is up and about. You don't see all these subtleties. I see it all. I'm a sage. With my Rishi vision, I see the realities. You don't see it. Just wait. And as I said earlier, he tried talking his way out of the situation, although he's getting weaker and weaker in his presentation, because of a sense of obligation. So you have to be a little kind also to Kashyapa. Often the men want to blame Diti, but the ladies want to blame Kashyapa. You should have known better. You could have taken the hard line. Now look what happened. Your wife's going to give birth to Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. Don't put the blame on her, or don't put it all on her. But this sense of commitment and obligation. I was talking with one senior Vaishnav based in India, and he was saying, you know, Maharaj, here's the crux of the difference between India and the West. In the West, you do whatever you want to do, and you don't care what anyone else thinks. In India, you're always worried. What are they thinking about me? What are my commitments? What are my obligations? In the Western world, obligation, commitment? How are my senses feeling right now? Am I happy in this moment? That's my obligation. That's my commitment. So it's kind of hard in the Western world to see the pressures on Kashyapa. He tried his best, but the best wasn't good enough. And now he has to deal with the outcome, and he's bringing the bad news to his wife. Polluted consciousness, inauspicious time, violating dharma, insulting the demigods. What do you expect is going to happen? So it's a very impactful chapter upon us for understanding that there are reactions to our actions. We're not living scot-free. This chapter makes you think very deeply. Still, out of this debacle comes Prahlad Maharaj. And Kashyapa will spend about 6 verses, we'll hear, glorifying the grandson of Diti. And she's happy to hear that. So we learn a lot in this chapter about proper consciousness, proper family life, and don't forget Vidura's eagerness. That's what sets the whole chapter into action. He's eager to hear more. I've heard about the firstborn avatar. I want to hear about the second one because it's the second one who kills Hiranyaksha. And remember how Maitreya Rishi is pleased to reciprocate. Vidura has told Maitreya Rishi, I'm a faithful disciple. Actually, the Bhagavatam describes Vidura is begging Maitreya Rishi with folded hands, please, more, more, more. We can only hope for that kind of eagerness in our own life. We become so enthralled by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam that we beg more, more, more. So we'll stop here and ask if are there any questions. So Vas Prabhu is revealing his ecstasies. Yes.
Maharaj, thank you very much. I was trying to convince my wife about point, because she was every day, why is the blaming Titi? And I tried my best, but I couldn't figure it out. So I appreciate very much the point that you just made about obligation, cultural obligation. Now my question is there any other part in the scriptures or the acharyas mention something that it almost sounds like it goes about dharma, almost sounds like it's higher than...
Kashyapa higher than Dharma?
No, I mean in that, using your example of giving about obligation.
He should have been above that, but my point was, and it's a point made by the acharyas in their commentary, that he was overwhelmed, not by lust as we think of it in contemporary culture, but he was pressured by, well, she's a good wife, and I got family obligations, her sisters all have children. It's taken me 40 years to understand this, because, but householders should understand it more easily. He's not putting himself above Dharma. At the same time, there are these factors that are pushing. So he's not really submitting to physical urges. He's submitting to the whole obligation system that he's a part of, but he should have been able to hold the line. He should have spoke angrily, no. But he didn't do that. Why? Not because of anything physical, but because, well, you can explain better than me. For the Saffron said it's taken us a while to figure all this out. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. I just like if you could clarify about the two different incarnations of Lord Boar, because it looks like this one is the one who fights with Hiranyaksha, and we had the previous one, that's the one who rescued the Mother Earth. And if you could say something about that, and also because of
just one, please.
I wanted to just say about the incident that the Lord, he actually married the planet Earth, and how that affects us as devotees in relation to the Earth planet.
You want all these intricacies, you go get the BBT version of Laghu Bhagavatamrita, and it describes all the intricacies about the boar avatars. It gets very intricate. But I was focusing upon how the Bhagavatam merges the two. In Rupa Goswami's Laghu Bhagavatamrita, so wonderfully presented by Gopi Pranadana Prabhu and his team, you can get into all those details about Varahi and the consort of Varaha and all that kind of thing. All right? Yes.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, Guru Maharaj. It's a very nice class. So, to follow higher dharma, higher duty is for all time highest than fulfill this kind of obligation, what is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is for all time.
Wait. He wasn't denying her desire to have a child. He's just saying, wait. But she had her own metaphysical outlook. When you're in distress, something has to be done right now. Try to understand that with some sympathy. Don't imitate, but try to understand with some sympathy. It's tough getting the brahmacharis to have sympathy about this.
But still, right things to do, highest things to do, is to say no.
Yes, Kashyapa knows that. He has to live with the outcome also, remember? He's the father of these monsters. Okay, next question. You won't understand.
So there's just one other aspect to it, and that is even before this happened. He knew that that possibility was always there. And knowing that the possibility is always there, he has to know what he should do in order to bring out a positive result or a happy result. But he didn't, obviously. And the result was a very unhappy result, and therefore he got what he got. But preparing ourselves by realizing the possibilities can avoid a lot of danger and difficulties and troubles. So that's why we have to think sometimes ahead and not always just for now.
All right, Amala Bhakta Maharaj has given us a practical guideline. As Prabhupada writes in Bhagavad Gita, a yogi is someone who uses his senses, her senses, according to a predetermined plan. All right, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.